Hi, my name's Elly Greaney and I'm the Commercial Director at Transition Partners. We're a tech recruitment consultancy with an office in Leeds covering the UK market and an office based in Berlin. I've worked within tech for the past 5 years and find the market fascinating. I'm really passionate about helping women not only get in tech, but really advance their career with an exciting industry that can provide endless opportunities. I love networking and finding out about other people's stories. I decided to set up the Journey of a Woman in Tech to share knowledge, wisdom, and hopefully have a laugh along the way. Feel free to get in touch on LinkedIn to see how you can get involved. I hope you enjoy the podcast. So hi to anyone who doesn't know me, my name's Elly Greaney. I'm the Managing Director at Transition Partners and I run a podcast called The Journey of a Woman in Tech. Hopefully some of the attendees, because we're doing a live session today, might have heard the podcast before, but it's all about inspiring our next generation of women in tech. So today we're doing our second live episode. So it's a live webinar. So there's actually an option for everyone that's participating in today's event. There's a Q&A section and a chat. So feel free to drop us a message, any feedback on the podcast, or also ask some questions. We've got our fab guest, Nat Pearce, on today. So Nat's here to answer all of your questions. We've already had a lovely message from Connor. Hi, everyone. I love these events. I'm currently trying to break into the tech world, so I'm super excited for this one.
Yay.
That's fantastic. So Nat Pearce is a strategist, service designer, leader, innovator, maker, doer, and many things in between. She's been working at Spark since 2016, and since then she's helped to shape and grow the company into what it is today. So whilst also working with a range of clients, including Amnesty International, Fidelity, HSBC, Vocalink, ITV, and NHS. So Nat is also part of the leadership team at Spark, where she's responsible for people and culture strategies, leading and coaching the managers, whilst also overseeing the brand and marketing side, which is really interesting. So Nat is really passionate about empowering women, sustainability, inclusivity, kindness, and not taking life too seriously, which I love. If you haven't heard of Spark, they are part of the BGSS business as well. So Spark is a design and innovation consultancy born out of BGSS, who originate actually from Leeds, but now they're a global organisation. They are a collective of thinkers, innovators, strategists, designers and doers. Together with BGSS, not only do they design great things, but they also deliver too, which is fantastic. So thanks so much for coming on the podcast, Nat.
Thanks for having me. What an intro. Thank you.
Was that a big one? Was that all right?
It's lovely, yeah.
It felt quite grand, actually, but I think it's just the multiple job titles that you have.
It's like, when people talk about it, I'm like, oh God, that is quite a lot, isn't it?
Yeah. No, but I think it's really interesting, and there's some great, I guess you've mentioned so many different things in the introduction that we can discuss today, which I'm super excited about. So it will be fantastic if we can start the recording today with a brief introduction into your current role and what you're up to at Spark.
Yeah, sure. So in terms of my craft, as you mentioned, I'm a strategist and a service designer, which means that I help companies explore the future, identify opportunities, and then kind of figure out what to do in that space. So that's where the strategy comes in. And that can often feed into the design of new products and services, which is where the service design comes in to support their vision. And I guess like where the kind of strategy and design part operates for me is a lot in the digital space, which obviously bodes quite well since we're working in a technology consultancy, which is BGSS. So yeah, very much on that kind of like digital side of things.
Fantastic.
And then, yeah, so in addition to that, I'm on the leadership team at Spark, and my role is head of culture. And that really covers kind of like the end-to-end employee experience, all the kind of things that are included in what makes a company be a great company. And for us, part of that is having like a really strong culture. So a culture code, and what that means for us in practice, but then also, you know, stuff like recruitment, onboarding, career progression and stuff like that, like the general kind of well-being. So
what's so great about the culture at Spark?
Great question. I love that. So we're actually in the process of iterating it. And so one of the things that I think is really great about our culture is it's always evolving, and we always have a statement on what our culture is, but we're cognizant of the fact that we're a growing organization. And as we bring new people in, there's new perspectives and stuff like that. So it's always evolving. I think as well, like, it really ties us together and expresses how we work. So things like we embrace ambiguity, and we're always like trying to adapt. So we often say that we have a methodology, but we're prepared to like throw out the rule book if we need to. We take action, so we like to say that we're doers and not just talkers, although obviously we do love a talk as well, to be fair. But we've got a bias for action. And then another key one is about, like, we always have each other's back. Like, we're really, really supportive. And at any time during the week, you could go onto our Slack channel and someone's like, hey, I've got this problem. Does anyone have 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever to just like brainstorm with me? So there's like this constant like team, like bringing together of the team. And we have a couple of others, but I think those are like the really top of mind ones for me that make me really proud to work there.
I think it's clear, I guess, from your rapid progression and development, that having them sponsors and that support network just really helps propel your career. And I think a lot of people that have joined the podcast today, they're really interested about getting into tech, and the opportunity and finding the opportunity is definitely a challenge for a lot of people. So I would love to hear your journey. How did you get into tech, and what did you have to do to get to where you are today?
Yeah, my journey is like a little bit random, I guess.
All the best ones are.
I've now bigged it up, haven't I? It's not that it's quite boring. So I studied economics at uni, which was fine until I had to do maths. Which just like would break my brain. I had to do like 2 maths resits in my like uni career. So kind of almost probably didn't pass, but I did in the end, so that's good. And because I did economics, like the normal thing to do is to go and work in a bank or like do like a banking graduate scheme. So I was like, okay, cool, I'll do that. And so I worked in a bank in the UK for 4 or 5 years. I did 2 years on a graduate scheme.
Was it HSBC?
It was RBS.
Oh, RBS, sorry, yeah. Cool.
And during the graduate scheme, I was like, I don't really know if banking is for me. But then I was lucky enough to get into the strategy team in RBS, and specifically the digital strategy team. And so when I was there, I was responsible for coming up with and contributing to the payment strategy, so the new payment strategy that was we were going to take forward. But then I was like, strategy is great, but I want to be able to see the strategy through. Like, I want to be responsible for like putting our ideas into the hands of like customers. So
full life cycle of it.
Exactly.
And exactly. see the digital benefits that come off the back of it.
Totally. And so that was when I went into the digital design team in RBS, and I was specifically looking at like the strategic development of the mobile app, so the NatWest and RBS mobile apps. And yeah, that's kind of where I really got into like design thinking and digital design and service design and stuff like that. And it was awesome. We were doing user research all the time. I was working with developers, I was working with BAs, I was like working with all of these different people. But I guess when I was in banking, it was like not long after the financial crisis. And so budgets were like very small. And it was really hard to make like big, innovative, creative choices. Because the budgets weren't there. So I felt it was quite hard to be like a designer in digital banking because obviously I wanted to work really creatively and like think of like, you know, the future of digital banking, but really we didn't just have the scope at that point, which is when I found out about BJSS, and I met with some people that
How did you find out about them?
Through colleagues. I think that it was like through colleagues within the digital team in RBS, and I can't quite remember exactly, but yeah, it was through like networks or something like that. And I met with someone from BJSS that was like, hey, we're starting this new design consultancy. I don't really know much about it. Would you like be interested in having a chat? And so I met the founder, a guy called Simon Sear, and he told me about his vision, and I was like, sign me up.
Wow. And back then, I mean, that must have been a bit of a risk, because you had some great experience from your time at RBS. You're still very young in your career now, but back then even more so. We're talking like 4.5 years ago now, right? So that must have been a bit of a risk to take a leap from, I guess, the security and the brand that RBS had to join this new. I know obviously you had the security that it was BJSS, who obviously are extremely successful consultancy that's known globally for their delivery, but to join Spark, which was unheard of then, that was definitely a risk.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I actually hadn't heard of BJSS, so they were kind of like small and unknown to me as well, because like my friends that worked for consultancies worked for like Accenture and Deloitte and like PwC and stuff like that. So I didn't, obviously when I joined, I realized that actually they had lots of massive clients, and you know, that was pretty secure. But yeah, I kind of like, I don't know, like I just like went full pelt and was just like, who cares? Like, this is exciting. Let's figure it out. And, you know, I would never, ever, ever like regret that decision. I think like it's one of the best decisions.
Well, it sounds like it's really paid off anyway.
Yeah, it's been amazing.
And so when you left RBS, what was your job title then?
It was Digital Strategy Manager.
Okay, perfect. And when you joined Spark, you were the third, number 3 employee. Is that right? Wow, that's amazing, isn't it? And so from that day forward, I'm sure, as with any growing team, it was all hands on deck. So tell us about the past like 4.5 years, the journey that's been on as well.
Yeah, so when in the early days of Spark, everyone's role title was a digital consultant. And that meant anything from like a graphic designer to a service designer to a, you know, product manager. Like it was just whatever needed to be done. Like that was, you know, a strategic design project. We were, as you say, all hands on deck. So in the early years, there were like kind of 2 hats. One of it was like doing the work for the clients that we were working for and helping them to rapidly design and prototype new ideas, new solutions, new products. But at the same time, because we were so small, there was also like, I really felt part of the like designing what Spark could be. So we would like, back in the early days, we would meet in the Hoxton in Shoreditch and decide what our strategy is for the next year, like 4 of us. And then eventually that would bigger and bigger. But like for a very long time, every single person in the Spark team was a part of building our strategy. Now, obviously after a while that becomes a bit difficult to maintain, but still like we do a lot of things based on feedback, and a lot of everyone kind of has a say within the team of like what the future looks like and a way to contribute. So yeah, I mean, the early days were very much that, very much client work. Like obviously I'd only worked in banking, so I was like, I need to get more industries, I need to get more like experience like working in my craft and consulting. But then as we started to get bigger, there were more and more like internal opportunities. So I started looking after our onboarding and making sure that our onboarding was really great for new people. I then picked up like we had an apprenticeship scheme, so I picked that up. And there was a couple of other things that I was like picking up, and then we were like, oh, okay, well, you've picked up loads of things in people and culture. Shall we make that something more formal? And again, back then it was still like, it was a formal responsibility, but we didn't really have like a leadership team. We've had a leadership team in the last like year and a half. So that was when it was like formalized into a leadership team, which kind of, that was part of our maturity. It's like, oh, okay, actually we need some more structure and we need to empower more people around the business. And we're actually still on that journey now. So we're about to launch a load of new roles internally that allow people to like step up, which is really exciting.
So there's loads of opportunity for you to progress and develop, and clearly you've done extremely well so far, so that's amazing. And I love the fact, I guess, your involvement with the people is really important. And I guess my next question is a little bit around that, because we're all aware of the tech gap and what this looks like, but what can we do to help increase diversity in tech?
Yeah, I think it's such a great question and such an important question, and it's one that I'm personally like really passionate about. And I think that when we think about diversity in tech, it needs to be much broader than just gender. Like, it needs to be about ethnicity, about accessibility and disabilities, and LGBTQ plus. It is much broader than like just gender. And the impact of not having that diversity can actually be really terrifying. Like, I don't know if anyone on here, or if you have read the book called Invisible Women.
I've not read it.
Yeah, I can see it on my bookshelf. I should bring it over. So is an amazing book. I highly recommend it. But it's all about the impact of a lack of data on gender in all industries. And so, like, an example of the impact of that is like all the studies on heart attacks have been done on men, but the symptoms that women show when they have a heart attack is the direct opposite of what men show. So a lot of people go undiagnosed, and then, you know, that can like literally lead to death. And I know that's not necessarily...
Gosh, that's scary, isn't it?
Isn't it? And there's so many examples in this book, and I know that that's not necessarily like related to tech, but like, what if we're working with the NHS and we're like, you know, designing something that's based on this data that like doesn't represent women? Or, you know, loads of algorithms out there are accused of being like sexist and racist and, you know, ableist because the data is based on men. So anyway, I've gone off on a bit of a tangent there, but
but it's all relevant, isn't it? It's not, I guess, if you're looking at data that's all a certain pool specific, we're going to have the results that we need to be able to make informed decisions.
Exactly. And so I think in terms of like what we can do, I think there's a couple of things. I think first of all, it's really important to educate the dominant groups on bias and privilege. So in tech, that's white men, for example, because a lot of these biases and privileges aren't, they're like unconscious. So we can't do anything about them if we're not aware of them and admit to them. I think that for a lot of companies, we need to like redesign our recruitment practices entirely. And identify where there could be like inherent biases that we're not even aware of. And then also use like networks that help represent marginalized groups. So for example, for Black and minority ethnic people, for recruitment rather, there's the BYP network, there's YSYS, there's People in Colour in Tech. Like, there's all these agencies that we can like start to work with that you know, can help on that journey. And then finally, I think like we have to look at the project teams that we put together and consider diversity when we put project teams together. So make sure there's a balance of women, make sure that there's like you know, a cultural ethnicity balance, but also you know, other aspects as well, which might feed into something. And if we can't make the team diverse because our organization isn't diverse, then we have to figure out how we're going to fill those gaps. So if you have no representation of people with disabilities, then how are we going to fill that gap so that we are representing people that need to be represented in the room? So those would be my 3 things.
Brilliant. Love that. And I think it's so important to have that pool of diversity in your team to be able to represent the customer well as well, and do what's best in the interest of your customers, because ultimately you're working with a diverse pool of customers as well. So I think that's fantastic. And I love how passionate you are about people. I think interestingly, this kind of probably delves a little bit further down this avenue. What does your head of culture responsibilities mean?
It means that I am the warm and fluffy person in the team.
That's a good description.
Yeah, I'm like the people person. I'm the one that's like always finding out what people are doing, and like if people are okay and stuff. But aside from that, that's more about my personality. I think culture is what makes companies special. It's why people choose a 50-person company over a massive consultancy like Accenture or whatever. Yeah. So my responsibilities are about evolving our culture as we do, like upholding it by creating initiatives that help us kind of live and breathe and understand what it means to like take action or embrace ambiguity or so on. And also to like make sure that it shows up really strongly in our brand, so that clients want to work with us because of our culture, and people want to work for us because of our culture. And then it's kind of like underneath that, it's a lot about I mentioned before, like the employee experience. So recruitment and onboarding, career progression, reviews, diversity and inclusion, mental health and well-being, and looking at all of these as experiences, like we would with clients, right? All of these are experiences, and seeing where we can improve it. And obviously this is based, of course, on feedback from the team. So, for example, some of the feedback that we got last year was that they were like, yeah, we really agree with the culture. Like, we all agree that our culture is really strong, but it's hard to articulate what that means in practice. Like, how do we make these cultural values tangible? So for the last 6 months, we've been working on developing a core competency framework that underpins all of our cultural values. So you can see what behaviors, skills, and knowledge underpin taking action or embracing ambiguity or so on and so forth. So that's an example of the kind of thing that I would kind of initiate and
it's amazing.
So it's always changing, really.
And it's important with a consultancy because people are, I mean, tech companies in general, people are a huge aspect to the business, but when you work for a consultancy, you are the business. Without the people, there's no consultancy and there's no service, there's no product. So
100%.
So it's so important, isn't it? But I think there's some really great initiatives that you're taking. And then I love the fact as well, because I think sometimes as a consultancy, there's such a focus on revenue, going out there and working with the clients and on these projects, that not enough time's invested in the people and supporting the people, which is obviously a big shortfall. So it sounds like you're doing that Spark really well, which is amazing. And that's obviously part of your role, which you seem to be doing fantastically.
That's why I don't have a business development role. Like, if I was business development, we would make no money because I just put people first. So,
there needs to be a good blend.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's tough, isn't it? I think for a lot of people when they're looking to go into tech, and it's easy to go online or listen to the podcast and hear about all these fantastic companies with these great cultures and they do all these cool things all the time. When you're looking for your first role in tech, which a lot of people, my listeners are for sure, there's always a bit of a challenge, isn't there, where you're like interviewing with companies and they're probably not right for what you want, and you hear about all these great companies, but you need an opportunity. And ultimately, you need to gain some experience somehow. So sometimes that can be tough. Have you got any tips for anyone looking for their first role in tech and managing expectations? I think because tech is associated with beanbags and pizza, but realistically, your first job might not look like that.
Yeah. I would say if you're seeing a company that has beanbags and pizza, question what they're covering up, because like there's a reason that companies put beanbags and pizzas in, because they want to replicate like what it looks like to be in Facebook or whatever, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they've got the right culture. So that's what I would say on that. But then in terms of like how to get into it, it's really hard because often, like when I put a role out there for a UX UI designer, experience comes into it massively, especially when you're working in consultancy. So it can be quite hard if you're fresh out of uni or whatever, to compete with that. Having said that, we have never put like a level of experience on our applications, because some of the best people that I've hired have been, you know, you look at their CV and you're like, okay, they haven't really got any experience with clients, but they came through the door and absolutely like knocked my socks off. And the reason they did that is because they were able to show an understanding for what it was that we needed by taking their own initiative. So whether it was university projects where they had thought about like the whole double diamond of design or whatever, or they'd actually designed and built a product, or they've done it in their spare time, or potentially working with a charity or whatever. Like if you haven't got the experience in paid work, like make the experience yourself. So, you know, think about the job that you want to have. Like if you want to be a developer, how can you, say you want to be an app developer, like how can you develop an app and, you know, document the whole process so that when you're going into the interview, you can say, yeah, cool, I don't have paid experience, but look at this, what I've done off my own back. Like I always find that like incredibly impactful. And I think
more so than paid experience, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think it's just so relevant right now, the whole situation that's going on in the economy. The last financial crisis, people stopped hiring grads, and there was the market, it's had such a negative impact on the market for years. It took us a while to recover because there was no new talent pipelining coming through. And this is across all industries, not just tech, but I think now is the time. I think those examples that you gave there of making yourself really stand out is more important, because it is so competitive. Obviously at my role in recruitment, there's people that are really experienced applying for roles who need work. They've got families to look after and they've got mortgages to pay, that are applying for roles they probably wouldn't normally have to consider. But now is a really interesting time, but you've got to show that personality, haven't you? And that really stands out. So it's great to hear that that's worked well for you as a hiring manager when people are applying that spark, which is amazing. So thank you for that. You recently wrote a blog, so anyone can follow you on LinkedIn to read the blog. Actually, it's fantastic, about your top 5 tips for goal setting. Why do you think goal setting is super important, and what is your next goal?
So why do I think it's important? Well, for me, like I guess it's like quite a personal thing. I have a fear of like meandering through life and not making an impact. And I guess like there's downsides to that, by the way. It means that I like question everything that I do, and I'm constantly like worrying if I'm doing enough or whatever. But at the same time, it kind of drives me to always like think ahead and think about like, who do I want to be, or what do I want to be doing in the next year, 2 years or whatever. I've never been a fan of like 5-year career plans. Like that's too far out for me, but like a year, 2 years, I think it's important to have like a North Star, and not to be so specific that you can't like, you know, pivot or whatever, but having like a North Star that's kind of, that broadly summarizes like what you want to be doing, and then aligning things that you do to that, I think for me has helped me progress in the way that I've progressed, because I've always been aware of like what the next thing is. And there's another brilliant book actually, which I highly recommend, called Grit, by Angela Duckworth, I think it is.
I've heard Grit's amazing. It always comes up as a recommendation.
It is such a good book, and it talks about having like a high level goal, something that you're like the grittiest people, which are believed to be the most successful people, are the people that have like high level goals that they're like always aiming towards. I actually read Grit after I read that blog. But when I read Grit, I was like, yes, it's my research. I haven't just made this up.
It's definitely a great blog. So if anyone's interested, definitely go back on Nat's LinkedIn, connect with her and have a look for sure. So what's your next goal then? Can you tell us?
Yeah. So my goal at the start of the year was very much about like finding and using my voice more, like so writing more, doing stuff like this, like speaking to you, like doing more presentations, because I feel like the year previous I was very wrapped up in like leading internally and like, you know, all of, like looking inwardly, and I was like, oh, I've actually got a couple of things to talk about and a platform that I could use, and so that was kind of, that's been working quite well so far, so I'm happy-ish with that front.
And that's good in a particular current climate as well, because it's not easy.
Yeah.
Pretty intense social calendar of events in tech, isn't there? Like there's so many different things you can get involved in the tech community. All you've got to do is click on Eventbrite and you can go to something different every night of the week if you want, but obviously at the moment it's been a bit more difficult, isn't it?
You know what, that's such a good point, because actually I probably wouldn't be feeling good about that goal right now if I'd not been in, you know, at home a lot of the time. It's given me a lot more time to do this, so
that's good.
And now I'm kind of like, I'm happy with how that's going. So what I'm trying to focus on now is going from someone who's very passionate about stuff like diversity, inclusion, like anti-racism, that kind of thing, to someone who like really knows their shit and can use that knowledge and empathy and influence to make real change. I think that...
Love that. I absolutely love that, because it's so easy to be passionate about it, but you need the information to back it up.
Yeah.
Did you tell me that you read, like, is it 2 books a month? Is that what you're trying to do?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a good way to do it, isn't it? So cool. And now you're putting that into practice, which is amazing.
I'm trying, yeah. So I still got a lot to learn, right? Like it's a constant learning journey. Like I'll never stop learning, but I'm just trying to turn that more into action and use whatever kind of influence that I might have in the role that I have to actually make change. So that's what I'm kind of like pumped up about at the moment.
Good for you. Well, it sounds like this year's been a really good start to that. And I loved on your profile about the piece about sustainability. So I'm going to organise an event about sustainability on, do you know, like Earth Overshoot Day?
Oh yeah, I've heard of it.
Yeah. So I've got an it's on the 29th of July, and I'm going to organise an event about sustainability for that, because it's something that I've like not really delved into too much, but I'm really interested to learn about more, because obviously super important topic, and yes, we'll have to get involved in that as well, because that'll be a good one. Amazing. What's throughout your career you've worked with some really cool teams, some great inspiring people. What's the best bit of advice you've ever been given?
Best bit of advice. You know what, like I love this question, because it's usually people just answer with like this beautiful, like really tweetable one-liner, and like I'm always like, what would I say? And now I have to think about it. So I think like the thing that comes to mind for me is like in the past and over my career, I've definitely like felt imposter syndrome, and I think in consultancy like that never really goes. Like you're always a little bit like, I've never worked in this industry before, I've never done this before, so you constantly like, particularly
because you're consistently like looking at your background, like you've done bits of different stuff, so there's always going to be a first time where you've never done that before, but you've got to give it a go and take the risk and know that you've got the knowledge behind you. It might not have been with the same industry or slightly different, but that must be really tough, because you're consistently going into the unknown.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why in Spark we have this statement of embracing ambiguity, because we have to do that to be good at our jobs. And I hate the feeling so much of like not being like fully confident in what I'm doing, but out of that I think comes like the best growth, when you know you've overcome something that you thought you couldn't do. So there was a particular time, maybe like a year and a half ago, where I was like, you know, the leadership position was like being formed up, and I was like, oh, like I don't know if I have enough experience in design to lead, to be one of the leaders of this company. I don't know, like, etc. I was just like in a bit of a
doubting yourself.
Yeah.
Which we all do it.
And there was this incredible woman, and a good friend of mine actually, called Julia Petretta, who looked me in the eye one day, and she told me that she was like, you are a leader. And she said that my age, experience, background don't matter. She was like, if you're fierce and you inspire people, then you're a leader. And that's
you
always
certainly do that.
like, stuck with me.
Yeah,
So
I love
thanks,
that.
Julia.
Definitely do. I think that's fantastic. Just so we've got a couple of more questions to go, but just for the live listeners, feel free to just pop any questions that you might have for Nat just in the Q&A box as well, or on the chat, so we can go through those as well at the end, which would be great. So throughout your career, who's been your greatest role model?
See, I find this really hard, right? Because I have so many. Like, I have been so inspired by so many people. Like, I'm inspired by people every day, like my friends, my colleagues, like especially all of the like women in my life. And so I find it really hard. Like, you know, Julia's one of them. My friend Alicia is like, she's the most incredible service designer like I've ever worked with. I'm working with someone called Kat at the minute, who is just like this fountain of knowledge in diversity and inclusion, and making me like think about like that so much more. And then, you know, throughout my career, there's like, I was going to try and do like a list then, I would forget people, so I'm not going to do that. Like the kind of, like I'm at the Oscars or whatever.
Yeah.
I'd like to thank my mom. Well, I would thank my mom. Thanks, mom.
Yeah.
I guess like, yeah, so I always look like up, down, sideways, like diagonally for inspiration, because I feel like the people around me are some of the most inspiring. They just might not be famous yet. But if I was going to look at famous leaders, the one that always comes to mind at the moment is Jacinda Ardern, the New Zealand president. And I love her because she has shown that you can be a leader, you can be a pretty badass leader, whilst also being like compassionate and caring. And I'm just like, yes, that is what I'm about. And then another that is front of mind right now would be Angela Davis, who is just so she's a Black civil rights activist,
Okay.
and she, like, looking at the videos of her in the 80s when she was arrested and like talking about police violence, all the way through to like what she talks about now, is just so like, you're just like, wow. I've learned so much from like following her.
She's
looking
fierce, for sure.
So fierce, so fierce, like continuously like fighting for what she cares about. And I'm like, if I can even embody like a minuscule of that energy, then that would be great.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, definitely some great role models there. Words of wisdom. What would you advise your younger self if you were to go back 10 years at the start of your career? What would you say to yourself?
I would say, don't worry if you don't know what you want to do yet, because you'll figure it out, and just try things and see what happens from that. Like, I think that I was so worried when I left university that I had no idea like what my purpose was and like what I should be like focusing on. And I think maybe if I'd spent more time like looking inwardly and thinking about what makes me happy and, you know, what my kind of personal purpose is, it maybe would have helped me navigate to the role that I'm in now a bit quicker. But equally, like, just not worrying about it so much.
The days of like a set career are gone, aren't they?
Exactly.
Like, yes, it's not often someone leaves school and says, I'm going to do this and stays there forever. And I think particularly even more so in tech, because it's not, well, when you leave school, or the careers advisors never tell you about all the different opportunities in tech and the different roles and what they look like. But even when people have been to uni and done a computer science degree, they don't understand all the different opportunities there are in tech. So I don't think you need to, I guess, not be so hard on yourself that you just need to pick something and stick to it, because no one really does that anymore. It's not. Yeah.
Such a good point.
Over women, over a female's life, they change like they change career like at least 5 times or something. Like, you have to be able to adapt and pivot. And you also, as well as a person, like every 5 years, your personality changed quite dramatically. So obviously your work is a huge part of that. So it's really important to be able to pivot and do what you love at the time and what's best for you and what really makes you happy. But I find that definitely frustrating. I think that a lot of, I guess, apprentices and people looking to move into technology aren't really aware of all of the options that are open to them.
Totally.
I mean, that's something that I'd like to do maybe in the next couple of year or so, is commit to spending a bit more time like going into schools and speaking about what opportunities are out there for people, because that might encourage. I know last time me and you caught up and we were chatting about like creative people never think about like tech being an opportunity. I guess they probably think of like developing is not a creative role, which it is, and there's so much opportunity. Exactly. But I think tech isn't thought of for creatives initially, but I think when people realize about the level of opportunity and the level of roles that are in tech, then I think we'd be able to encourage a lot more people into the industry, because it's
definitely
amazing thing to be part of.
I would describe my job as, like, if someone said what industry you're in, I would say I'm in the creative industry, but I'm also in the tech industry. Like, it's like the intersection of the two. And I did not know that my job existed, like, well, even past uni, to be honest. And I don't think many career advisors know that it exists. So I think, like, if you're someone new in the tech industry, like trying things out, like doing different things, especially when you're young and moving around quite a lot, like, I think sometimes people say that people shouldn't move around quite a lot. Like, I don't agree with that. I think move around as much as possible in the early days, so that you can find what you do like and what you don't like, and then out of that create like the perfect role for you.
Particularly in tech, it's not really frowned upon. Like, I think some more traditional industries, that people stay in a job within a company for like 5 years. In tech, I think 3 years is like, if you've learned everything, anytime you get to the point, if you've got nothing more to learn, you need to move on.
100%.
And I think in the UK, the average is like sort of 3 years within a company. But we do a lot of recruitment over in Berlin, and in Berlin, it's if you get 2 years, they're happy. That's a good amount. So we've got some feedback and some questions on the live Q&A. So thanks, guys, for getting involved. And if anyone's got any more questions, please do put them up. So first one is just a message from the lovely Lucy. So Lucy said, thanks, Natalie. Really interesting to listen, and loving all the book recommendations too. So that's fab. Maybe you'll have to write a list of your top 5 books or something.
Oh yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah. So Sandra says, where do you want to be in 3 to 5 years time, and what is your plan to get there?
Oh, that's a good one.
CTO.
Sorry?
CTO, head of digital.
Yeah. So as you know, I don't really think too far ahead. So 3 to 5
There's always got to be a pipeline dream there, isn't there? It's like the ultimate.
I would love to be working more in like social good. So I think that design and digital and tech, it can be quite an exclusive club. And I want to really support the future of talent in the industries. But also, I do think that there's something to be said around like sharing skills more broadly and giving them to like the companies that really need it. So sometimes like your big corporates aren't necessarily the companies that need some of the like amazing skills that we can share. And I would love to be able to like open that up and facilitate that.
Yeah. Have you got any ideas where you'd want to partner with a charity or anything at the moment in pipeline, or are these just sort of things that you're thinking longer term?
Well, actually, we are speaking to a couple of companies at the moment about some opportunities to do some mentoring and to do some like pro bono stuff, which we're still kind of like figuring it all out. So I can't necessarily talk about it yet, but if you followed me on LinkedIn, you'll hear all about it. So yeah, I'm starting to make those connections now, but I would love to, I guess, if I'm thinking like 3 to 5 years, like make that like what I do.
Love that. Absolutely love that. That's super exciting. Perfect. So Connor said, absolutely love your journey. As mentioned earlier, it can be hard for graduates / less experienced people to gain first-time employment, especially in the current climate. 100% agree, Connor. You've just got to keep smiling, keep proactive, and you just got to be really resilient about it. Have you got any tips for that, Nat? Because I think at the moment, a lot of people, particularly graduates or less experienced people, that the amount of applications you're having to make at the moment. I know we said about being more creative in your approach, but is there any top tips that we can give Connor for that?
I would definitely say like start your own projects and like do some stuff, like show your skills in a tangible way by creating your own like passion projects. But as well, like I would also recommend maybe looking into getting a mentor. So you can like literally like look on LinkedIn for people that you know, that maybe you've seen them do a talk, or like you've seen them put a blog out there or whatever. A lot of people are pretty chilled about people contacting them direct and being like, hey, I'm looking for a mentor, I love your journey, like would you mind meeting me every other week and just having a chat or whatever. And people have more time now to do that. So actually now is a really great time. A couple of my friends are actually doing this at the moment. So you don't necessarily have to go to a formal program, but I guess the good thing about that is that you're creating a network in the industry that you want to go in. And they, once they've built a relationship with you, could probably say, oh, actually, I know someone that you might be interested in talking to. I know they might not have the experience, but they've done X, Y, Z. So it's almost like they're kind of
sponsoring you, isn't it?
Exactly. So
I think
if you
that's
don't have
really
your own,
important.
yeah, it's like if you don't have your own network, use someone else's. And a mentor is a great way to do that.
It's daunting, isn't it? But there is, like you say, people in the tech community, they're very open. Like all these great networking events, people are spending a lot of their own time or quite often their own personal money they're all passion projects. People love it. People in the tech community are very open to people who require extra support. So I think, like Nat said, if you reach out to people, you would be really surprised, but you have to put yourself out there because no one's going to do it for you. So I think having that confidence is tough, but you need to find it to be able to get those opportunities. And Connor said he loved that. So thank you so much, Nat. That's fab. Good stuff. Someone's asked, what events or groups would you recommend to go to if you're looking to move your career forward in tech?
I must admit that I tend to prioritize design ones personally, apart from like women in tech and stuff like that. But I would recommend Tech Circus. They're really good for events. I would also recommend like if you follow ones like Web Summit and stuff like that, like they tend to have stuff ongoing throughout the year.
And I think at the moment it's a bit of an opportunity because everything's virtual this year. Like pretty much most of the big conferences globally have been cancelled this year, and there's going to be a lot of opportunity for some of these, like Web Summit. The tickets are pretty expensive as well, aren't they? There's things like that most people you probably wouldn't usually be able to go to, but they'll be doing lots of free online virtual content and stuff that you can take a look at. So I think it's created a bit of an opportunity for people as well, particularly if you live in a limiting location or something.
Yeah.
Great, amazing. So that's fab. How would you suggest, this one's from Connor again, how would you suggest to fully show employers your transferable skills that may not come across in your CV?
I would say writing a personal profile and a cover letter where you can talk from, so I know everyone says write in the third person, but I just think that's weird. So I
find it a bit strange.
Yeah. I'm like,
and I look at CVs all day.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'm not writing a novel about myself, like just first person. But yeah, like that, like a cover letter is a really good opportunity for you to like get your personality across. And I would encourage you to not in a lot of people in a cover letter will just rewrite their CV. It has to be different from your CV, and it has to, like, I would talk about your passions and like why you're passionate about this industry and where you see the future going, and just like bringing that human side out. I think as well, like you could potentially look at alternative ways to show your work. So creating like a digital portfolio, which you could potentially code and build, and you could say, oh, I've built this. Maybe like, you know, you starting to build your personal brand through like videos and like blogs and stuff like that, it can just show different dimensions of you. So that's what I would say about that.
Yeah, I've got a top tip if you want to work for someone and this person is like the ultimate, someone you really aspire to be like in the future. You could also, if you like connect with people on LinkedIn, you can send them a video. So where you write your messages, usually you can actually just attach a video, so you could record it, because personality is really hard to get across on a CV, isn't it? But you could actually send them a direct message saying like, hi, introduce yourself, who you are and what you're about and why you're really interested in them. And it's things like that that are going to make you stand out from the crowd, isn't it? So that's fantastic. Courtney said, I've recently started my own social media and blog for my work as I've just finished my degree. Have you got any tips on how to reach and engage a wider audience? That's a great question.
Well, that sounds awesome. If you want to share it with me, I'll share it on my profiles if you want.
There we go, that's a great offer.
I don't know how influential that would be, but yeah. Have I got any tips? I think that actually joining like-minded networks is quite a good way to meet other people that are doing similar things to you, and you can maybe like promote each other's work. So like building out that network, I think would be really important. Obviously, you can kind of diversify across the channels that you operate on. So if it's I guess like, are you using like a range of platforms to like put stuff out there? Are you so if you're using Medium, for example, you can contact some of the like established what are they called? They're called like publications, and see if they will feature any of your work. So I've been lucky enough to be featured by the Startup on
oh wow,
on Noteworthy, I think it was. And
cool.
that then like, you know, vastly increases your audience, because they will then send that out to their audience. And so if they've got like 600,000 subscribers, then all of a sudden like that's up there. So, you know, making connections with them and trying to see how you can kind of push that. And actually on Medium, there are loads of articles about this. And if you do get good following, you can actually get paid for it as well. So some people make hundreds of pounds per blog that they put out there. So yeah, Medium is a great place to start.
Fantastic. Amazing. What's your favorite platform to use? Is it Medium?
I use Medium, yeah. But I haven't tried any others, to be honest.
Great. Perfect. Well, hopefully that will help, Courtney. I think it's on our last question. So if anyone's got any more questions, say them now, forever hold your peace. Sandra's question, any training courses that you would really recommend?
I would recommend IDOU courses are really, really good. I was lucky enough to do one at the start of the year on storytelling. And what I really liked about that is that the training platform they use is really great. And they make you accountable for the learning. So you have to give feedback on other people's assignments, and they have to feedback on yours. And so,
oh wow,
it's self-learning. You can do it in your own time. But for me, that made me actually like, I could have easily just watched the videos and like done a couple of bits and pieces, but that made me
follow through piece when you're accountable. Better, doesn't it?
So IDOU are amazing for courses. What other ones have I come across lately? You know, like I've seen some more recently on GDS, the Government Design Service, which a colleague of mine did one on content design. And given that, you know, the government kind of have the gold standard for digital products, going there and showing an understanding of like how to do GDS work is a massive benefit, and like will look really will look good going into, you know, not just like government but like consultancies. Like it's something that we often look for. So
I think the course you did, I know earlier when you were talking about some of the stuff that you would go to is a little bit more with the events, it was niche, it was a bit more service designer, but the course that you mentioned there about storytelling is so important for the whole of tech in general. That is a really great piece of advice there, guys, because that is that is relevant to any role in tech. It's so important. And even I've got another podcast called Let's Talk Leadership, and me and my colleague Sandra interview sort of C-level directors of businesses, founders, and the key piece that always comes up, the one skill that they always can't sing enough about, is that storytelling, because it's just so important throughout your career to be able to take everyone on that journey with tech. So that's definitely a really great tip there. So I think if that's all the questions that anyone's got, I'd like to just say a massive thanks to Nat for coming on today. You've been a sensational guest. I knew it would be a good one. So really pleased to be able to have you on the show. If anyone wants to reach out to you directly, what's the best form of contact? Is it Twitter or LinkedIn?
Twitter or LinkedIn, yeah, or on Instagram. On Twitter and Instagram, I'm Nat J Pearce, Pearce, and then on LinkedIn, just Natalie Pearce.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Yeah, and if anyone is interested in keeping an eye on all the events that we're going to get involved in, I'm definitely going to rope Nat into some more events with us anyway. But if you follow the Transition Partners accounts, we post up all our events across all of the different various platforms that we use. So yeah, feel free to follow us at Transition Partners. And thank you so much to all our guests that have joined us today on this live webinar in this, what is it, the second hottest day of the year. It's absolutely glorious outside, and we've got a great following here that have taken part in today's event. So thanks so much for sharing the time, guys. And thank you so much to the listeners as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.